Episode 235 is sort of part two to the last episode. Actress, writer Polly Humphreys is joining me for part two. Say hi, Polly. You're here.
Bonjour.
This is the intro. Typically, I record an intro, but I'm going to try something different here. And we're just going to go right in. People just want to listen. So, part one of this two-part series was showering blandishments at Succession and why Succession, I think, is so valuable to our culture and possibly one of the best. Not possibly, definitely one of the best television shows I've ever watched. So, part two of the series is going to be a dive into Smartless, the documentary that just came out on, ironically, the Max show or the Max network. And I want to just give a little bit of perspective because, again, you know, one could just go onto Twitter and throw venom and vitriol at this Smartless documentary. And it's possible that Polly doesn't agree with me, but this is sort of the preamble to the episode. So I started listening to the Smartless podcast, much like many of you, at the beginning of the pandemic. And I think it was the perfect break to what was going on culturally. It's three guys that are all friends, and, you know, two of them kind of make fun of each other. And Sean often, you know, he sort of adds this levity to the show, or he's like, help me out, Polly. Why does Sean work? Because he's not like the jock guy like Will and Jason are. He has a different perspective. What works with Sean on the show?
I mean, but it's not just Sean. It's the three of them.
Yeah, but there's a certain dynamic that he adds that they don't have. What is it?
Yeah, he adds the gayness.
The gayness. Okay, maybe it's that simple.
Yeah.
And you know, I was reading a review about Smartless that came up like a year ago. It also works because the Rolodex that those three guys have with their connections to Hollywood is obviously huge, and they were able to bring on a huge library of guests. So to me, it's not a very complicated recipe of why it worked. It worked because people were stuck at home. We all thought we were going to die from this awful virus. So if we're going to die in the next 6 months, well, let's just spend an hour and listen to Will Ferrell talk. Conan O'Brien, I think, was on the show, and it was easy to digest. The other reason why I think it worked is because podcasts are an audio-only format, or at least that show is. And you can work while you're listening. You can drive while you're listening. You can do the dishes or vacuum or work out. It's an easy, audible-only form. So, in contrast, and I'm frustrated, and I'm probably going to sound a little negative here as I talk about my utter disdain for this new documentary that came out that's documenting the Smartless podcast. And I promise I'm almost done, Polly, with my preamble.
My God. Okay.
And the reason why, look, I want to enjoy something. I do think that their podcast Smartless, although I've stopped listening to it because after a while, it's the same thing. It's 5-10 minutes of them bickering, and then Sean just ridiculous, just over the top kisses everybody's ass. And part of my issue with our society is we lionize actors too much. And I know that you might take that personally because you're an actor, but it's not just, it's people on TV. We culturally lionize people on TV way too much. And I think this podcast actually contributes to that lionization. So I'm excited to watch the show because Sam Jones, he's a director. He directed one of my favorite documentaries, I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, where he's talking about Wilco. I don't love Wilco, but I certainly respect them, and I think that documentary is great. I think he had this show called Off Camera on Audience where he ironically interviewed actors, and I thought it was fantastic. He's a photographer. A lot of the Rolling Stone cover photos he does. So I was all in. But then I realized why the documentary, in my mind, doesn't work. they're only spending about 5 to 10 minutes on the Conan O'Brien. They're spending way too much time watching these three white guys complaining about like hamburgers and food, and Jason Bateman's doing a food fight in the hotel, and they look like spoiled brats, and they're not funny. The reason why it's funny on a podcast that you're listening to is because you're just listening to it and you're doing it while you're like doing the dishes or working. But if you're just sitting on the couch and watching grown men riding their bird scooters or in a hotel room complaining about the menu, or then Jason Bateman, which I've kind of had these impressions of Jason Bateman, but now they were actualized. I think he's a spoiled brat. And the way that he's talking to his taxi driver, and then he's trying to get into the gym at the Four Seasons, and the door isn't opening, and he's like, still red, not working, still red, still red, still red. It's like, do you realize, like, whoever decided to create this show, I think, is off their rocker. It has no self-awareness, because just showing three guys like getting into the Four Seasons is like, we don't need to watch that. It's the self-awareness. It comes across as so self-indulgent and just uninteresting. So there you go. I know, big preamble.
Oh my God.
Wow. How are you going to follow that up?
Are you done? Okay, a couple of things. So I definitely disagree with you. And as you know,
But you did it at first on the third episode.
Right.
So what changed?
When I watched the first episode, it seemed contrived. You know, the bird scooters, the dumb comments about landmarks in DC. It felt to me like the producers were going like, oh my God, say something stupid about the Washington Monument. And they were like, yeah, good idea.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I don't think, Eddie Cohn, they made this documentary for you. Because it's not about the guests. The guests are for the podcast.
Interesting.
It is about the three of them. And a couple of things are going on here. Let me fit. But
Go ahead.
Get up in your mouth.
Sorry.
So number one, they have a fan base that is incredibly devoted to them, loves the three of them to death. And this is where you and I probably do agree. I think someone went, let's make something that does more with their personal relationship around the making of this show. Let's A, take them on tour, and B, make a documentary about it so that all those people who follow them on Facebook and on Twitter and post pictures of themselves, and like it's a huge and very loving fan base. They would, they've been waiting for this. Secondly, part of what makes the podcast work is the chemistry between the three of them. They actually have been friends for, a million years.
Absolutely. Yes.
And so a lot of what happens in the podcast, it has to do with, their discussion with the guest, but it also has to do with whatever they're talking to each other about the guest, or about, the way they behave around the guest. And if you don't like any of the three of them, that's your problem.
I do like them.
But no,
no, that's not true. No, I think I like them. I like Will Arnett as an actor, and I also think he's really funny. I like Jason Bateman in Ozark. Don't really know Sean Hayes at all. I do know he was on that big show on NBC,
He was on Will and Grace.
But I don't think I liked them and their childish behavior and
Right. So
egomaniacal behavior when I started watching them. I was sort of like, here's an opportunity to sort of maybe learn a little. Like there was a moment where they explained why how the podcast started.
Right.
Where Will is going to make it about addiction, and then it sort of evolves into this thing. And I actually thought that was a moment that was real. But everything else where they're like trying to get into the gym and they're having food fights and they're just bickering and complaining.
But dude,
there's nothing
look,
endearing about that.
A documentary about Justin Bieber is not for you either.
No, but I just watched the documentary on Pink on Amazon. I'm not a Pink fan, but I thought that was actually really well done because I think Polly, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this, the ego of those two, not Sean, the ego of Will and Jason, and sort of the privilege, the irony, the privilege that it oozes off the like. Do they realize how lucky they are? There's like the idea that they think that them talking about the menu on Four Seasons, the idea that they think them sitting around eating food and exercising, like that is interesting. Like to me, that is dumbing down their audience.
I mean, I think if you are a regular member of their audience, a lot of what happens on that show is about what they ordered for lunch and you didn't like it and you never liked cucumbers and it wasn't Smartless. It was during the pandemic. I think it was one of the late night hosts. I think it was Jimmy Kimmel, was Zooming with Will Arnett. And as a thank you, and Will Arnett, I think, was stepping in at the last minute for someone or something, but Jimmy Kimmel had sent him a meal. He sent him like a steak and a salad. And so they've got the 2 boxes, and Will Arnett, as a bit, started eating the fucking steak while they were doing the thing and commenting on it and like talking about blue cheese. Like this is part of what they do. And for the people that really love them, it was just getting deeper into that stuff. They rib each other about what they're eating. The whole thing with Jason Bateman and, always eating salads and being worried about pooping and all of that stuff. That's part of what the appeal is to the people that listen to them regularly. It's getting more into what makes what happens between them in the podcast so funny. And it is reinforcing that this is what their friendship is actually like. It's not just for the podcast.
Totally valid. Totally valid. And the thing is that to me, to your earlier point, this is just a Cha-Ching. Like I know. Last little point here. I already knew that they like talking about poop and golf, and Sean eats really badly. And Jason's trying to stay thin and eat salads, because I do listen to the podcast when they do have the guests on that, they had Bono, or no, they had Bono on, and they had the Smile on, or Tom York. I mean, they're terrible interviewers, but it doesn't even matter because they aren't Mark Maron. No, of course not.
My boyfriend, Mark Maron, but that's for another time. They aren't Mark Maron. But the people that are listening to them, maybe they listen to Mark Maron separately, but they're not listening to experience an in-depth interview.
But here's the thing.
It's like being at a party with these guys.
But here's the thing that I don't think they thought about or they didn't care about. A podcast is a completely different thing than asking somebody to sit on a couch and watch it and Listening to them bicker for 5-10 minutes, that's it, is easy to do. And listening to Conan O'Brien for 55 minutes, who's freaking hysterical, is really easy to do. But to watch them bicker and act like children for the majority of the visual, and then only have Conan O'Brien on for like 5-10 minutes, who is by far the funniest part of that episode, to me is a huge mistake on the creators. And I don't think they either cared, or to your earlier point, they're thinking their audience is all in already, and they're just going to gobble it up. And I don't.
They did not make this show for you.
No, but again,
someone
I don't
else.
know if I agree with you, because I am a fan of the Smartless show a little bit. I listen to probably 50.
But you're a fan a little bit.
Yeah,
you're a fan a little bit. You know, I would venture a guess
hold on. So that
if someone made
yeah.
a documentary about something that you are really invested in, and it wasn't as serious as it might be, it didn't get as deep as it could get, you'd still be into it. This isn't a documentary about the show. This is a documentary about the three of them.
But okay, so here's an earlier point that I said to you on the phone. I, again, think it's thoughtless and egomaniacal. The three of them are very talented when they have a Broadway show to perform. Will Arnett is incredibly funny when he's on that show. And obviously Jason Bateman is a great director. I don't know if I love his acting, but he's a great director and he's been on incredible shows. But them riffing for 45, 50 minutes, I don't think they're good at that at all. And I think Conan O'Brien is great at that because he has that thing that they don't have. He is on another level. You know, Howard Stern is on another level when it comes to interviewing. I mean, I'm just throwing his name out. I don't think, even with Sam Jones, and even though it's black and white, and let's just make it black and white because that's what we need to do to make it seem cool and creative, I just don't think the three of them, although Sean Hayes is a brilliant actor, and I know he has a play in Chicago right now. As I said, Will Arnett's funny. I don't think
he has a play on Broadway in New York. He's brilliant. He's great at doing that thing. I think it was short-sighted. But again, I don't think I'm more sophisticated than the Smartless listener. I just don't think it's very good. And I don't think they're very good at doing that. They're very good at acting and et cetera, but they're not the level of like the Conan O'Brien when it comes to just like being spontaneous and funny. I keep going back to what we're talking about is taste. It's a matter of taste. What they are doing doesn't appeal to you. And that's fine. Yeah. It doesn't have to, because it appeals to a large enough section of, again, this, very devoted fan base who love to hear these guys give each other shit about what they're eating or about what they're pooping, to
ask people to watch that also, I think is very egocentric.
First of all three of them say more than once in the documentary, I can't believe we're doing this.
That's true.
I can't believe we're doing the tour. I can't believe we're making this documentary. Does anybody want to watch it? But somewhere on their team, someone was like, oh, believe me, there's an audience for this. And sure enough, with the tour, they had that one where they had an academic on and it didn't go well and Twitter was destroying them. And then triumphantly, they came back and they had David Letterman and they had all these people and it was, fantastic. And, and through it all, the three amigos stayed true to their relationship to one another. And all of the people that really love them were delighted.
Yeah.
They even showed, lots of bad moments. A woman who chased after their car in New York to tell them that she was so disappointed, so fucking disappointed that she came all the way to see them and she got AOC.
I haven't seen that. That would be funny. Yeah.
That was fucking hilarious, and Will Arnett is like, oh, okay, thanks. Sorry about that. Oh my God. It is, I think that it is, and I didn't feel this way after the first episode, but I actually think it is well done, and it is created for a very, very specific audience, because it's not like it's a little niche audience. They've got a huge global audience for this show.
Huge, of course. Yes.
Yeah. So
I just think we talk about thought, and I think here's the thing. I think the main thought was Cha-Ching.
Yeah.
Because we just are going to show them being goofballs, and that's enough. And I guess, and this is something that I talk a lot about, we'll maybe leave it here. My time I place at a very high value. Like,
right.
Again, my time is limited. I'm getting older, and I can listen to the Smartless podcast while I'm working or while I'm jogging or doing the dishes. But to ask me to sit on the couch for 45 minutes, it needs to be something that is Succession, or that world, or even a great documentary about Alanis Morissette. It's got this, to me, it's just not even coming close to that.
But what I am saying to you is, they didn't ask you to do that.
Yes.
They've got plenty of people who couldn't wait to do that. It's not for you, like fucking, you bring up Alanis Morissette. I fucking cannot stand Alanis Morissette. She's never, and I guaranteed I would think that a documentary about Alanis Morissette was not worth my time.
Right.
So you're kind of a fan of the podcast. You're iffy about Jason Bateman. You kind of think Sean Hayes does a little too much ass kissing. Yeah. So this isn't the documentary for you, and that's okay.
But I do think
documentary you will love.
Wait, say that again.
It will be about Leo, your cat, and Tom York.
But I do love. I love Will Arnett, and I certainly loved Ozark.
But that's not enough for you, clearly.
I have a hard time, and I feel like you felt it too in the first episode, when you have three rich white guys, privileged, you were watching them being critical about the minutia. I think I'll be curious. I haven't read any reviews. I think it's a huge turnoff, and I was immediately turned off when I'm seeing them being.
Just let me say this.
Yeah.
I don't think in theory that is true for me too, and probably for a lot of the people who actually do like the show, but that's not the focus of this thing. It is about how they behave when they are on the road in their private plane or at the Four Seasons or whatever. They still are the three of them doing the shit that they do with each other. The privilege of it. I mean, it's the same, if you watch a documentary about Beyonce and Jay-Z, they are certainly living high off the hog. You see that as well. But the privilege isn't the turn off or the turn on. When you're watching something about people who are living in that world, the turn off or the turn on is how you feel about them. What the documentary shows you. And what this documentary decided to do was just showcase the relationship between the three of them. And that was, again, it was not meant to create new lovers of the show or new lovers of the three of them.
Yeah.
It was meant to service the people who wanted to see them sitting there
Eating hamburgers.
eating hamburgers and pooping with the door open, you know?
Well, it's interesting. We all have a radar, a shit detector. We all have instinct. We all have vibes. We all have feelings about certain people that come into our life. And there's something about Will Arnett and Sean Hayes that they feel like they realize how lucky they are. And there's a certain level of humility that I feel when I hear them on the podcast and then when I watch them. Jason Bateman, I'm telling you, I feel it when I listen, and it's reaffirmed. We may meet one day, and maybe he'll hate me. I don't know, but he comes across as a spoiled brat and egomaniacal. I just feel like he feels like, oh, I was a child actor. And you should love me. It just that energy just exudes off the screen, and we'll see if other people feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean I don't get that from him. I don't get a different vibe from him than from the other two.
Okay.
They all seem like people that have worked in the business, and part of the thing with Jason Bateman is that the other two bring it up all the time that he's had a life in show business, and that his experience is different from other people's. But yeah, I don't get that vibe from him. And I think I like him more as an actor than you do. He is one of those actors whose personality is even, when he does comedy, and it was true in Ozark too, that sort of cynical Jason Bateman flavor is what makes him interesting. He's interesting as an actor because he is Jason Bateman.
Yeah.
And that can maybe, it's a little fingernails on a blackboard for you, clearly, whereas for me, it's fingers on a harp.
That's great. Well, I think this was really good. It probably is better conversation. Because if you would have just look at it this way, you would have just agreed with me for a half hour, then this would have been boring.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
But what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that our fan base is going to fucking love this.
Yeah. And people are going to be
all three of them. Leo.
Yes, Leo and
Nelly,
Emmy and Nelly.
And Emmy, yeah.
Well, people are going to be Team Polly or people will be Team Eddie. Maybe, and a lot of people may not be so obsessed with time, and it's weird. I'm just so just annoyingly anal about making sure every minute of my day is effective, and
you are.
And I am.
Much
I'm weird
more than I.
Yeah.
And I will say this too, the reason that after that first episode, I was like, I don't think I'm gonna.
So what made you go back?
What made me go back was, living alone. I will often, if I'm doing something that is I was cooking, I was making chicken soup and chopping up all this stuff, I will turn on something. I'll either listen to music or turn on something that I don't have to really pay attention to. So not something that's plot driven. It's how I've watched many things that we won't discuss because I'm embarrassed about watching them. But I decided, I was like, I'll do the next episode of this thing while I'm making the soup. And I was hooked. Hooked-ish.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought. And then I watched another one, and then I got it. It was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
This totally is a Cha-Ching, but it's a charming, interesting, funny Cha-Ching that I can completely, give my time felt well spent.
Yeah.
No. My time felt okay spent okayly. Oh, Kaylee?
Oh, Kaylee.
Oh, Kaylee.
Oh, Kaylee.
Oh, Kaylee.
It's weird. Like I don't see charm when I see three guys ordering overpriced room service at the Four Seasons.
I know you don't.
I don't see charm.
I know.
I'm sorry. That's the last word that comes to mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
But hey, we'll agree to disagree. And
I'm never coming on this fucking thing again.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I know you will, because I always love our conversations. That's the one thing I miss about working in the same room is that I don't have these conversations as much. Yeah, and I think it's good to have. They certainly make me feel fuller, and it energizes the capillaries and the cells when I get engaged in these types of talks. So I think this is good. Yeah.
We're good for each other.
You don't feel the same. You're like, oh my God.
I totally do.
Where's my watch?
Yeah, exactly. All right, moving on.
So this is don't say goodbye. But let's say we'll do a podcast goodbye. This is episode 235. Polly, join me for part 2 of the downward-facing spiritual spiral as I examine how technology is not only affecting our society, but also the creative craft. If you enjoy the show, write the review, share it with your friends, and I'll be back with Larissa Corso, actually. She's my next guest. I'll probably throw in a podcast there before that. But Polly, thanks for joining me on part 2.
You're welcome.
And I'll see you all very soon.